Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Original Medicine Podcast. In this week's episode, I'm going to be talking about perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, the whole thing. And I want to get into what Chinese medicine has to offer us, what it tells us about it, how we can support ourselves, how we can mitigate symptoms, and we can mitigate long-term effects of estrogen depletion. Let's get into the basics of menopause, simply because I think that our education is woefully lacking in anatomy and biology. So I think many of us don't have what I would consider a basic understanding of our bodies. I have been really floored at the things that I've learned recently from other doctors talking about this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I didn't know this. Like, it's shocking to me. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and that everybody has like the basics under their belt before we move forward to talk about the Chinese medicine piece. So what is menopause? Let's just start there. Menopause is the one day that comes a year after not having periods, not having a menstrual cycle for a year. You get to that one day, that's menopause. After that is postmenopause, and leading up to that is perimenopause. That word alone means around, and we're talking about around the time that we get to menopause. The average age of menopause across the world is 51, and it varies from country to country. 51. Now, we know average doesn't apply to everyone. And here, I'm obviously not talking about people who have medically induced menopause, or there are always going to be some people who have very, very early menopause. And I'm sure there are people who go through a really late menopause. We're just talking averages here, okay? So 51 is the average age of menopause. And you can have perimenopause beginning up to 10 years before that, and sometimes before. So since this is like a shot in the dark, we have no idea at what age our individual menopause will be. And my guess is like probably it's even more than 10 years back. So like we're looking at late 30s, we could have changes in our bodies, in our minds, that have to do with the changes in estrogen. So I think it's important to have this conversation so that people can be more and more aware of how to support themselves. And that's what I really want to get into with Chinese medicine, because the research is increasingly showing that before the women's health study that was 20-ish years ago, when women were given HRT, the outcomes were much better. After the study that was terribly misconstrued, a lot of information came out that said estrogen causes breast cancer. And again, I'm not an allopathic medical doctor, so I don't feel qualified to talk about the specifics, but I'd really encourage you to look into this if you want to know more about it. There are a lot of women, female physicians on social media these days who are graciously sharing their research and their experience with patients. And this is across all categories of medicine, from OBGYN care to orthopedics to neurology, also urology. Definitely check all those women out. They're amazing. They call themselves the Menopause. It's really funny. But basically, the understanding is that menopause is a tremendous transition in life that affects all women who live long enough to go through it. Essentially, what I find so important to understand is this is an opportunity denied to many. Many of us do not live long enough to go through menopause. And so I feel fortunate to still be alive and kicking on the earth. So if it means that, I might not be exactly the same as I was 15 years ago, I'm grateful to still be alive. And I also believe in my body's ability to heal and my ability to support myself in doing that. And that's what I want to get into about Chinese medicine and how that can support us. In Chinese medicine, we are looking at the body in a drastically different way. And estrogen and progesterone are yin hormones, whereas testosterone is a yang hormone. And the process of getting to menopause is a decline in estrogen production. And that affects all kinds of health outcomes for a woman's body. But so does mediumship from a Chinese medicine perspective. And this is what I find so interesting, is that when we see a decline in mediumship means resources. So there are a lot of different ways to think about it. Like a car has different systems that require different fluids. And when those fluids become deficient, that indicates that you have a problem with that one system, or vice versa. When you start having these symptoms, you take your car to a mechanic and the mechanic says, oh yeah, like I know what that is. It's this system over here because it doesn't have enough, whatever. And I don't know much about cars, so if that's a terrible example, just bear with me. But hopefully that helps you think about there are certain fluids that we need to accomplish certain things. And mediumship is generally yin in the body. We get an allopathic diagnosis when we have symptoms of any kind. This is very often a depletion of mediumship. So what we are trying to do with Chinese medicine, when people come in my door and they say, I have psoriatic arthritis, I don't treat psoriatic arthritis. I treat the underlying cause for that person. I'm really treating the person, not the disease, but underlying people's symptoms. I have tinnitus. I have anxiety. These are examples of things that result from a depletion in mediumship. So when we use acupuncture treatments that help realign the channels, consolidate the resources, we coach people on their diet and their lifestyle habits to help support the rebuilding of that mediumship. Then they start saying week by week, oh, things are changing. Like I'm feeling better. I'm not noticing this. My skin is better. Like I'm sleeping better. All these things because we're building the mediumship. We're building the yin, and you can translate this yin to estrogen. Okay. So what I think is so fascinating about this is that in middle age, women start saying, my eyes are dry, or my nose is dry, my throat's dry. This is generally speaking a thin fluids deficiency in Chinese medicine. And I don't want to get too technical and lose you here, but what I'm saying is it translates directly to a group of channels that helps consolidate resources. And when you rebuild those resources, you don't have the dryness. Now, am I sitting here saying that with Chinese medicine, we can rebuild all your estrogen and you're not going to go through menopause? 100% no. That is not realistic. However, I do believe that you can be well supported through perimenopause, through menopause, and beyond using the principles of Chinese medicine. Your body is going to stop producing estrogen at some point. But I want to get into what can we do as we deplete our mediumship, we get increasing symptoms. And so people are talking about these days frozen shoulder. Well, frozen shoulder can also be a mediumship depletion. There's not enough resources, fluids. Think about oil in a car. When your car is pulled over on the side of the road smoking because you ran out of oil, what we really need to do is replace the oil. We need to make sure there's enough oil in the car so that the engine can run without getting too hot and smoking. Same thing with the shoulder. The shoulder can't move because there's not enough fluids or mediumship resources to make the shoulder, allow the shoulder to move in a smooth way. What we can do to support ourselves through perimenopause and menopause from a Chinese medicine perspective is honestly very similar to what is being recommended from an allopathic medical perspective. Let's cut to the chase and talk about what we need to do to support our bodies through menopause. And I also do want to talk about HRT because I think this is an important discussion that I don't hear enough acupuncturists talking about. Yin cultivation. We have got to eat in a way that is wet and deeply nourishing. We need animal fats. We need whole grains. We need beans. Yes, I totally agree with the recommendation to eat a high fiber diet. I'm okay with a high protein diet, but I'm really concerned about how I see people doing it. People are doing a lot of protein powders. They're doing a lot of high protein, low fat. And that concerns me because fat is also yin. Protein is going to be more yang energy. And when we already are in a place in life that we have declining yin, the problem comes in when the yang energy is raised, we get too much heat. And heat can be loosely translated into inflammation. heat in the body looks like all kinds of things because heat can dry mediumship, and mediumship is what keeps us from having symptoms, the autoimmunity symptoms, the creaky joints, the frozen shoulder, the neurological problems, the brain fog, the inability to sleep, the panic attacks, the anxiety, all these things that women are reporting that they experience through menopause. The things that are changing in their life that they've never had problems with before are a result of the depletion of yin, which in allopathic medicine we call estrogen. We can't stop estrogen from stopping. That's going to be normal, but we can support the ideas of yin through eating more warm, wet foods. We don't need to be eliminating food groups. We don't need to be overly focused on macros because we need a balanced diet. And when we over rely on yang energy, you're going to under rely on yin, and there's going to become an imbalance. A great example of this is when people tell you to add 4 egg whites into your 2 eggs in the morning to get XYZ, however much more protein. That's an insane recommendation because even though you do have the fat of the 2 eggs, the 2 whole eggs, an egg is a really amazing balanced food because the inside, the yolk, is yin energy and the white is the outside yang energy, which makes sense. The yang is closer to the outside. Yang energy rises. Like sun is yang, daytime is yang, whereas nighttime is yin and the moon is yin. So we need a balance of those things. And when we eat a whole egg, we are getting the balance just as nature intended. But when we are doing something like eating a bunch of egg whites, we're getting a lot of yang energy and not enough yin. And if you do that occasionally, that's not a concern. Food energetics is something that we want to look at what we're doing on a daily basis because we're really strengthening the message that we send to our bodies when we are doing it on a daily basis. And a lot of people, when they are following these kinds of modern nutrition recommendations, they are doing it on a daily basis. Every morning, they're doing 4 egg whites with their 2 eggs. Then they're making a smoothie every morning. And then they're, doing a protein shake later. And then they get into a routine because they know what their macros look like. And this is being encouraged from either a clinical nutrition or a nutritionist or like a health coach or a trainer, because it is meeting those goals. But we just have to think about the balance of that. As you increase the protein, how do you also make sure there's enough fat to prevent problems later on? Another really significant thing, which I do thankfully hear talked about in the allopathic circles regarding menopause, is prioritizing yourself. So many women have been taught to put themselves last, and they have fallen into this trap where putting themselves first is considered selfish. This cannot be farther from the truth. And I think the inability to address your own concerns, meet your own needs first, and to stop and say, I need help, to tell your family, no, I can't do that because it doesn't work for me. This is not selfish, it is imperative. The shift in valuing yourself will be so profound for you that you will get enormous benefit. We're looking at how emotions affect the channels. Emotions deplete, like unprocessed emotions deplete us. Emotions that you can't move through deplete us. Emotions that get shoved down, that depletes us. We are in a time, we are going through a transition in life that is a natural decline of mediumship. This is normal to be expected. We're working lots of hours at our job. We're doing nonstop things with the family at home. We're not taking care of our own selves. We're overextending all the time. That's not sustainable. We cannot do that. In some ways, I think I'm preaching to the choir. I think people know this, but I think the inability to set boundaries in your personal and work lives is really challenging, especially for women. I think it's hard for us to say no, and I also think it's imperative. That's my second recommendation. Protecting your mediumship and helping you rebuild the mediumship is first the dietary component. Leave the clean diet, the clean eating stuff to the wayside. That's not for you. Secondly, you've got to set your own boundaries and deal with your own emotional health, or that will become a depleting factor. We don't want that, obviously. The third thing that I wanted to talk about is HRT, hormone replacement therapy. I'm not a fan of using hormones to quote unquote fix a hormone problem that occurs in a time frame where we should have regular menstruation. If you're a 30-year-old woman and you don't have regular periods, you need to figure out what's causing the irregular periods. Taking birth control or some other hormone does not correct for the problem. It supplements the situation, and then maybe it gets you back into a regular rhythm. But rarely does that regular rhythm continue when you stop the hormones. Again, I don't want to get too far into the allopathic medicine arena, but I am trying to explain the Chinese medicine view of using hormones. And I'm using that as a comparison to perimenopause and menopause, when people are using hormones to also supplement because their bodies are no longer producing, is because we've outlived our endocrine system. It's just plain and simple. And again, I'm thankful for that. I think it's amazing that I've gotten to live this long, and I hope that I have many, many more years on the planet. So I'm happy to supplement my own yin with HRT, but that doesn't come in lieu of paying attention to my diet, paying attention to my emotional wellness, paying attention to my own boundaries, getting treatments as I need. All these things are important. The thought processes that are going through my mind that are producing an emotion, all these things are really important in balance. And I think that HRT can be very beneficial to me. And from my perspective, I think it supports mediumship. Just like your diet, just like appropriate exercise, not over exercising, not under exercising, getting treatments as you need, doing the mindset work, all of those things support yin cultivation. They support building mediumship. I also think HRT supports that same process, but I just give you the example of where I do find using hormones concerning is in the arena of my 16-year-old has extremely heavy bleeding when she has her period, so the doctor is putting her on birth control. First of all, birth control is an extremely high dose of hormones in comparison to HRT. But secondly, I don't believe that that is going to correct the problem. What I hear from all of my patients who have had this situation, what they have said is, I took birth control as a teenager because my periods were, fill in the blank. They were a mess. I had so much pain, whatever the case may be. And then when I got off of birth control because I wanted to have children, the same problem was right there again. So then once I was done having kids, I got back on birth control. We see over the course of 20 years, nothing has changed with this woman's cycle. She still has the same problem despite she has been prescribed birth control. This is what I'm trying to differentiate between. I think HRT is drastically different because we know why the body is not producing the same amount of hormones. But if you're a younger person who should be of biological age to expect to have a regular menstrual cycle and you don't, or you have problematic menstrual cycles for any number of reasons, that's something that I would really encourage you to dive in deeper and find out what the cause of that is. Work with somebody who is really into root cause medicine versus just prescribing anything. I don't think that supplements, I don't think that drugs, I think herbs can be root cause medicine, but I think supplements and drugs are really great tools, but I don't think they always get to the root cause. I think I've shared quite a bit here and I don't want to belabor the points. If you have more questions, please connect with me on Instagram. I'd love to hear your questions. I'd love your suggestions for topics that you want to hear more about from a Chinese medicine perspective. I think the wisdom inherent in Chinese medicine is really profound, and it saddens me that Chinese medicine is so often shrouded in this mystery that only acupuncturists know about it, usually. And even within acupuncture circles, less and less people are really into true Chinese medicine. More and more, acupuncture is a license to do whatever holistic or alternative therapy strikes someone's fancy on the day. And I don't mean to put people down, because I know that acupuncturists are out there trying to help people to the best of their abilities, but they're not realizing that they're getting farther and farther and farther away from the actual medicine. So I really want to keep this podcast focused on how we can learn more about Chinese medicine and use what it teaches us to support our health, whether that's with young children, with middle age, into our elderly years, through the whole lifespan, like cradle to grave. Like I always say that Chinese medicine is the OG somatic therapy, but it's also the OG functional medicine, and it's also the OG primary care. Cradle to grave is what Chinese medicine gives us. And I think that if we can learn the principles of the medicine, then we are primed to be able to apply it to our life no matter what stage we're in. And so that's what I really want to talk about on this podcast. So if you have further questions, or if something that I said didn't quite land or it didn't make sense, if you can please reach out and tell me that, because I really appreciate the feedback. It helps me get clearer in my message and continually refining as I go. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And I hope you're learning something along the way.